Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. So in today's video, we are going to discuss about the most important branch of anthropology, which is very relevant for the mains examination, especially when talking about the optional subject. That is the socio-cultural anthropology, also referred as social cultural anthropology. So within this branch of anthropology, today we are going to discuss about a topic that is of interest in general, as well as it is a very important topic in the socio-cultural anthropology part. So we are going to discuss that is mentioned in 2.3 unit of the syllabus, UPSC syllabus, that is the concept of marriage. Now, if we talk about marriage, we all have general understanding about a marriage. We all have our views about the marriage, and it is something that all of us have experienced, either for ourselves or for the relatives or for friends. But overall, if we talk about the concept of marriage in anthropology, students should make sure that they are not writing the concept of marriage, the definition of marriage as what they understand. In anthropology, it is very important that you write the exact definition in verbatim, we can say, that is given by the noted anthropologist or anthropological general. So first of all, if we talk about the definition of marriage, obviously attracts a lot of criticism, because no matter how encompassing or widely encompassing you want to make the definition of marriage, it always exclude some sort of marriages which is prevalent in certain societies, and thus there is a general consensus among anthropologists that we cannot have a universal definition of marriage. And first of all, if we try to understand, it was in year 1951 where we have the Royal Anthropological Institute of UK and Ireland. So this institute publishes a anthropological journal which is called as Notes and Queries. So the first attempt that was made to define marriage was done by this particular institute in 1951 in the Notes and Queries in the 6th edition of this particular journal. And how marriage has been defined at this point of time? So it was a very simple definition, where it was defined that a marriage is nothing but a union between a man and a woman. So that is the first and foremost important point. The definition clearly establishes that a marriage is a union between a man and a woman, where the child that is born is considered as a legitimate offspring of both the parents, whether it is the mother or the father. Again to repeat, as per the Notes and Queries, that is 6th edition, published by the Royal Anthropological Institutes of UK and Ireland, marriage is defined as a union between a man and woman, where the child born to the woman is considered as the legitimate offspring of the parents or both the parents. However, this definition have drawn a lot of criticism. Obviously, the first point of criticism is that a lot of other kind of marriages has not been captured by this definition. For example, in many societies, we have woman to woman marriage. In many societies, we have ghost marriage. In many societies, there is a concept of concubinage. Then we have the concept of cousin marriage. Then we have the concept of what we can say, this endogamy and exogamy. So a lot of very different types of concepts are there. For example, polygamy is there, polygynandry is there, polygyny is there. So none of these marriages has been captured by the simplistic definition of Notes and Queries, and thus it drew a lot of criticism about the marriage definition. Thus, later on, many anthropologists tried to give their own definition of marriage, but none of these were widely encompassing in nature. So, most important attempt in this regard was made by a noted anthropologist, that is Kathleen Go. So, Kathleen Go has studied the Nair community of Kerala, and on the basis of study of Nairs of Kerala, a new definition was given. And though it is also not a perfect definition, today in the field of anthropology, it is considered as the most universal and most widely accepted definition. And what did Kathleen Go said about the marriage, how the marriage was defined? It was simply considered as a marriage is nothing but a relationship that has been established. Now, if you remember, in the older definition, the union was between a man and woman. However, Kathleen Go took a much wider definition, much wider understanding of the marriage, and it was defined that marriage is a relationship between one woman and one or more other person. One woman and one or more other person. Now this person need not be male. This person can be female, and also it can be more than one. That means when you talk about the concept of group marriage or concept of polyandry, so that has been actually captured by the Catherine Go's definition. So relationship between one woman and one or more other person where it is established that the child born, talk about, she said that it is established that the child born under the rules that is not prohibited by the rules of relationship. A marriage is a union between a woman and one or more other person where it is established that a child born not prohibited by the rules of relationship is accorded full birthright status. Now these are the very, very important keyword. Full birthright status as given to the normal members of his society or social stratum. So these are the important keywords that Kathleen Go has put in her definition. So again, if we try to define it, repeat it, Kathleen Go defined or gave the most widely encompassing, most acceptable definition of marriage, where it is said that marriage is a relationship that is established between one woman and one or more other person, where it is established that a child born which is not prohibited by the rules of relationship is accorded or given full birthright status that is common to the normal members of his society or social stratum. That means it considered not society only, it also considered the class and caste stratification. It also considered what we can say is the social stratum that we see in the tribal society, where different tribals can have different concept of marriage, different understanding of the marriage. So all these are encompassed in the definition of Kathleen Go. But obviously here from the definition again we can understand that in modern times, if we talk about the marriages between man and man, so that is still not something that is defined as a marriage by the Kathleen Go. Second, if we talk about, we have concept of ghost marriage is there. So ghost marriage is a concept where marriage happens in the name of deceased brother or in the name of deceased kin of a particular person. So such kind of marriages are also not encompassed under the Kathleen Go's definition. So that is overall definition of the marriage. Now the most important question that we have to study in the anthropology, especially in the topic of marriage, is whether marriage can be considered as an universal institution or not. So the question that is in front of us is marriage a universal institution? Is marriage a universal institution? So anthropologists have said that marriage indeed is a universal institution, and the reason behind this is four. The first reason why we can consider marriage as an universal institution, it is because it performs universal functions. Basically, the marriage performs universal function. So what sort of universal function does marriage perform to be considered as universal institution? So first function that it performs is, we can say, it basically decreases sexual competition. Okay, or we can say mating competition. Marriage decreases mating competition. Why it is so? Simple reason is there. If we try to understand this from evolutionary perspective, basically if we compare man or humans with other animals, in animals there is a certain fixed mating period, while in humans females can mate whole year, 12 years. So due to this, what happens, there is an increased competition that can exist in the society, that can lead to fracturing of the society, that can lead to disruption in the overall social functioning. And that is why by instituting a marriage and institution, basically the mating is something that is basically fixed as per the societal norms or social norms. So that is the first universal function that marriage performs. Second, if we talk about, marriage also performs a universal function because it takes care of prolonged infant dependency. Prolonged infant dependency that is associated with a human child. So again, if you try to understand this from evolutionary perspective, and if you compare the apes, our most close relative. So if you talk about apes, apes have a kind of horizontal spinal column, and they were quadrupeds, and thus humans have what we can say is a vertical spinal column, and the reason behind that is because we have the erect posture. And as we all know, as anthropology has clearly have established fact that we have evolved from the apes. That means earlier we also had a kind of bent posture, but now today we have the erect posture. So when we were transforming from the bent posture to erect posture, due to this biological evolution, the size of birth canal reduced in the humans. So we have the reduction in size of birth canal, and at the same time we have the evolution of brain. That means the children were having, the child that were being born gradually as the progression happened was were having much larger size of brain. So birth canal is reducing and the brain size is also basically is becoming larger. So to accommodate this fact, the brain size of a small infant, the child that is being born, is smaller, so that can clearly pass through the birth canal. And thus, since the brain or the brain of the child is relatively smaller, it requires a longer period of dependency on the mother or the parents, as you can see. So to take care of the child, because obviously if the mother is continuously taking care of child for few months, let's say 6 months to 8 months, a year, even year or two, in that case she cannot go and find food, she cannot go hunting, she cannot go and hunting and gathering. So that is why there is a need for a male that has to be responsible, that has to be associated with the mother child combined, to take care of the needs of both the mother and the infant. So that is why something that cannot be done without having a proper social institutions, and thus by marriage it is the father who has been given the duty to take care of the mother child combined as long as the child is dependent on the parents. So that is the second universal function that marriage is performed. So we have decreased mating competition, second prolonged infant dependency, third universal function that marriage is said to perform, we can say, is it leads to formation of alliance formation. Now if you talk about the societies which are primitive in nature, so in primitive societies there is a large scale conflict, there is a large scale suspicion, and due to this increased suspicion, hostility and conflict, it is very important that a tribal group or any particular social group have to make sure that they are able to survive in this kind of environment. And how can they survive? Obviously by increasing the number of their members. And how can a society increase the number of members? So one way of increasing the number of members is by forming some sort of alliance. And that is why when you have marriage, what is happening, it is not only a marriage that is happening between one person or one individual or individual, it is also basically leading to development of alliance between the kins of bride and the kins of groom, and thus it suddenly increases the overall size of the society, who can come and help in case of any suspicion, hostility or conflict arises between two rival tribes or between two rival primitive groups. So the formation of alliance is another very important sociological function that marriage performs. So overall, due to these three universal functions that marriage performs, marriage is considered generally as an universal institution. Now coming to the next topic, what we have discussed about here is regulations. Now marriage is something that is tightly regulated, heavily regulated in all the societies. So what are the basic regulations that we see? So marriage regulations. Now what is marriage regulation? Simply we can say marriage regulation is nothing but it is a sort of norms. Marriage regulations can be defined as a norms that basically decides the nature, the structure and the function of marriage in a particular society. Again, we try to understand what is marriage regulation. Marriage regulations can simply be described as a norms that directs or defines the nature of marriage, the structure of marriage, as well as the function of marriage in a particular society or social stratum. And in this case, one noted anthropologist by the name of Needham, he has given three major marriage regulations that is being followed by different societies. So these regulations can be clubbed as, we have prescriptive regulations. Some regulations are called as prescriptive regulations. The second regulation is something that is called as preferential regulations. And the third regulation is called as prescriptive regulations. So three types of regulations we have: prescriptive, preferential, and prescriptive. Now prescriptive and preferential regulations are considered as a positive kind of regulations. On the other hand, prescriptive regulations are considered as a negative kind of regulations. Now why we are considering it differently? So positive means that prescriptive and preferential regulations basically directs that who a person should marry or must marry. On the other hand, prescriptive regulation is having a negative connotation because it directs at who a person must not marry. So it is talking about that who you should not marry, while these regulations are talking about who one should preferably marry. That is why it is having a positive connotation. Prescriptive is having the negative connotations. So let us try to understand each of these one by one. So first of all, if we talk about prescriptive regulations, what are the prescriptive regulations? So as we discussed, prescriptive regulations basically directs a person that who one must marry. That is very, very important keyword. One must. That means it is not a choice. If a person is a member of a particular society, a particular class, a particular caste, a particular clan, then he or she must follow this regulation. That is why there is a directive word of must. And if someone does not follow these prescriptive regulations, then it attracts very strong, heavy social sanctions. And in many cases where a person has not followed this must marry dictum, then he or she can be ostracized, his family can be ostracized. There can be what we call in India is what term is used called as hukka pani band. That means a person and his or her family might not longer be accepted as part of that particular caste or strata, and thus no help will be provided by the other members of that clan or society in case of any difficulties. And also the person and his or family is not invited to any social functions. Basically they are outcasted from the entire society if they are not following the prescriptive regulations. And in this case, two very strong prescriptive regulations are there. One is what we can call as endogamy, and one is what we can call as exogamy. So what is endogamy and what is exogamy? Let us try to understand this from the perspective of Indian Hindu society. So if we talk about a general Indian Hindu society, we can understand the social structure in forms of concentric circles. So at the smallest unit or the smallest level, we know that individual is member of a family. Then the family is basically a member of a lineage. A lineage is basically tracing its membership from a clan, we can say, in case of tribal societies. And then a clan can be part of a caste group. And here also you talk about Hindu society, then instead of clan, there is a system of gotra. So basically family, then after that we have lineage. After lineage we can have either gotra or a clan, depending on the whether we are talking about the caste Hindu society or the tribal society. After that we have the caste system. Now, or in case of tribe, this will be tribal system. So this will be tribe. So basically both endogamy and exogamy is practiced by the caste Hindu society as per India's family structure, social structure. So what does endogamy mean? Endogamy means simply that a person has to must marry within its own culturally defined group. That means a person cannot marry outside of this group. And what is the endogamy group? In case of India, mostly it is the caste. That means what does endogamy or rules of endogamy explains or tells you that if you are a member of particular caste A, you cannot marry outside of this caste. You have to choose your wife or husband who is also the member of same caste A, and that is why many times it is written as caste endogamy. That is widely practiced. And at the same time, it is also ensured that the person who one is marrying is not very closely related to that person, and that is why there is a practice of exogamy. So exogamy is just reverse of endogamy, where exogamy states that one must not marry within a culturally defined group, one must marry outside this culturally defined group, and in that case India, it is the gotra. So basically, in the caste Hindu society, what is followed is the Gotra exogamy. And Gotra exogamy clearly state that this is your family, this is the lineage, this is the Gotra. So one cannot marry within this circle. One has to find one's husband or wife beyond the Gotra circle, we can say. That means a person belonging to Gotra A, let us say, cannot marry another person who is belonging to same Gotra A. So basically, Gotra should be different, but at the same time, they should be member of the same caste group. And that is why we call this prescriptive marriage system as a Gotra exogamy and caste endogamy system. So that is about the prescriptive rules that one must marry within this particular rules of society. And that is why many times you will see that though with the what we can say with the effect of modernization, now gradually intercaste marriage, if you talk about 30-40 years back, it was not so common, but nowadays intercaste marriages are becoming very common. So these are something that is considered as a violation of the prescriptive rules, and that is why many times you will see that in case of areas, especially rural areas of India, in northern India, many times when the family feel that the son or if daughter has married outside of caste, they believe that it has basically insulted their honor, insulted the honor of the family, and that is why you have this heinous practices of honor killing that also you might see is carried out here and there every now and then. So that is one of, we can say, is effect of the violation of these rules that has been followed by that particular member of society since a long period of time. So violation of preferential rule is, as we have discussed, attract very strong social sanction, sometimes amounting to the killing of the individuals as well, unfortunately. Now the second type of marriage regulations that we have talked about is something that is called as preferential rules. So as clear from the name itself, preferential regulations basically is something that is not very strong. That means it only is directing a person that one must, not must, but one preferably should marry who. So this is a preferable choice. Even if a person is not following this preferential rule, even if one is not marrying to the preferable partners, it does not attract any strong social sanction, and that is how it is different from the prescriptive rule. So what are the examples of preferential rules or regulations? So first of all is something we can divide it into primary regulations, preferential primary regulations. The preferential primary regulations can be divided into two parts. One is something that we can call is parallel cousin marriage, and other is something that you can call as cross cousin marriage. So we have parallel cousin. What is parallel cousin? Parallel cousin means, if suppose, now before going into detail, let us try to understand some standard notations that is used in the anthropology. So the triangle is used to denote a male, the circle is used to denote a female, and parallel lines is used to denote the marriage relationship, and this descending kind of, we can say, these lines represent the offsprings. That means parallel cousin marriage means like you have two brothers. These represent two brothers because they are coming from the same parents, and these brothers are married to certain females. Now this brother suppose has a son, and this brother suppose has a daughter. So basically this we can say A and this is B. So A is a parallel cousin of B. Parallel cousin means that the sibling that is from the father's brother in that case. So here if we talk about the marriage that happens between A and B, then this marriage will be called as a parallel cousin marriage. So parallel cousin marriage is very common among the tribes of Arabia. The reason is very simple, because these nomadic tribes have very limited resources, and thus if a child is married to someone who is outside of that group, that will lead to basically what we can say division of the limited resources to other persons or to the other groups. And also at the same time, what will happen, the loyalty of this child can be diluted with respect to his or her own group, because obviously now he'll have certain allegiances, certain alliances with the other groups, that is the group of brides as well, the kin of the bride as well. And that is why, to ensure that the resources remain to the same society, to the same tribal group, and also the alliances do not shift, allegiances do not shift of the tribal members, it ensures that marriage is to be of parallel cousin nature. Similarly, the other variant is what we see is the cross cousin marriage. Now, cross cousin marriage means marrying a sibling who is coming from, what we can say, the parents of opposite gender. That means, for example, again, if suppose this is the one person, that is male, and this is female, that means both are brother and sisters. Now this brother have suppose a son, and the sister is also married outside and has a daughter. So in this case, the marriage between A and B will be considered as a cross cousin marriage. What is the difference? As you can see here, the gender of parents of both husband and wife or bride and groom are same, both are male. Here the genders are different. That means the son is basically marrying father's sister's daughter, and here the person A is marrying father's brother's daughter. So when one is marrying father's brother's daughter, it is called as parallel cousin marriage. When one is marrying father's sister's daughter, it is called as cross cousin marriage, considering both to be a group in that case. So this is one kind of primary regulations that we see in the Arabian society. This is something, cross cousin marriage is also seen in the African societies such as Dahomey tribe. Dahomey tribe of Africa also follows the system of cross cousin marriage. So this is one sort of preferential marriage rule that is coming under the primary regulations. Now, one variant of this which we see in case of India is something that is called as uncle-niece marriage, that is observed among the Khasa tribe of India. Uncle-niece marriage. This is also referred as the system of Doodh Lautawa. A very, very important term. It's called as Doodh Lautawa. So basically what has happened, uncle-niece means uncle, we are talking about maternal uncle. The marriage of niece with her maternal uncle is being practiced in the Khasa tribe of India. Also, it is practiced by the Gond tribe of India. And thus, what is happening here? Suppose in first generation, you have a child, and this child also has a brother, let us say, and C is marrying in her generation to someone from outside of the group, and suppose now they are having a daughter. So this is the niece and this is the maternal uncle. So basically, if we try to understand about the societies that follows the practices of bride price. So in that case, what has happened when the marriage, this particular person has married to the female member of this particular family, he must have given some sort of bride price. And in next generation, what happens when this particular maternal uncle is marrying her niece? In that case, also he will give back the bride price. So the bride price that is given by the member of, let us say, family A in the last generation is being returned in the next generation. That is why it is called as Doodh Lautawa. Again, to revise, in the first generation, the member of family A has given X bride price to member of, let us say, this is suppose family B. And in next generation, again the bride price is being returned back to the same family member because the daughter is marrying with the maternal uncle. So overall, these three are something that we can consider as the preferential rules of marriage. That is, primary regulations are parallel cousin marriage, cross cousin marriage, and the maternal uncle or niece marriage. Further, if you try to understand, parallel cousin can be of both patrilateral parallel cousin, matrilateral parallel cousin. Cross cousin can also be patrilateral cross cousin and matrilateral cross cousin. So this is the primary regulations. In the same preferential regulations, we also have something that we can call as secondary regulations. Now, in general, secondary regulations are of two types. One is something that we can call as sororal marriage. And many times the sororal marriage is also simply defined as sororate marriage. And other is what we can call as levirate marriage. So two types of secondary regulations, sororate marriage and levirate marriage. Now what is sororate marriage and what is levirate marriage? In simple terms, sororate marriage means that, for example, two persons are married, and here the wife also had a sister. Now, in case the wife dies, then the husband of the wife can marry the sister of deceased wife, and this kind of marriage is what we call as a surrogate marriage. So basically, in this case, what happens, basically, if the wife is dying, in that case the alliance between these families will break. But to make sure that alliances do not break, to make sure that resources remain, alliance system keeps on working, resources remain between the same family members, the the bond or the strength of bond that has developed due to this marriage remains same, stronger. That is why the marriage happens between the husband and the sister of deceased wife, and that is what we call as surrogate marriage. On the other hand, levirate is reverse of that. For example, suppose a marriage has happened between a male individual here, and then we have the female here, so husband and wife. Now, in case the husband dies, then it is made sure that the wife is marrying the brother of deceased husband, and that kind of marriage is what we call as the levirate marriage. Again, to repeat, surrogate marriage refers to the marriage of a man with the sister of the deceased wife. On the other hand, levirate marriage refers to marriage of a female individual with the brother of her deceased husband. And here also, what is the advantage? Obviously, again, if the couple have children, if suppose the husband dies, then this woman can go and marry someone else. In that case, the right of the particular family over the children will also disappear. So to make sure, and also if the wife has given dowry, she can take the dowry also back with herself. So to make sure the dowry resources, to make sure the right over the children remains with the same family member, the practices of levirate marriages practice. So we have surrogate marriage and the levirate marriage. These are something that we can call as the secondary regulations. So that is all about the preferential rules of marriage, and then we have the, before we have discussed about the prescriptive rule of marriage. The third and last rule of marriage is something that we can call as prescriptive regulations. Prescriptive regulations. So prescriptive regulation basically is when the regulations clearly establishes that who one must not marry, and in this case the most important is a practice that is referred as incest taboo. So if we try to understand this, incest taboo is the most important kind of prescriptive regulation. So what is incest? Incest basically is it is a relationship, that is a meeting that happens between two closely related individuals such as mother, son, father, daughter, brother, sister. So that is called as incest. And taboo is the word that has originated from the Pacific island, where taboo refers to such kind of activity that is forbidden. And why it is forbidden? Because it is considered as a sin. And why it is considered as sin? Because such activities are feared will attract the wrath of supernatural. And that is why taboo is something that has to be avoided, because if someone is partaking in this activity, he or she can invite the wrath of supernatural, and thus the entire tribe, entire society can suffer because of this. So when you combine them together, that is what we call as incest taboo. That means the forbidden mating relationship between two closely related individuals, as we describe this in anthropology. So if we try to understand that why this taboo exists, there are various anthropologists that have given different reasons behind that. So overall, 3-4 important reasons if we try to understand this. The first reason is given by Sigmund Freud, a well-known psychologist. Sigmund Freud has given what we call as psychoanalytic theory of incest. And Freud says that basically what we can say is, if we talk about a family, there is already a natural desire for a son to mate with his mother, and thus he cannot do so without, because the fear of father is there. So due to this reason, this desire remains repressed, and to make sure that this repressed desire does not manifest, society have created a taboo around this, and that is why we have the origin, or that is how we can explain the origin of incest taboo. In simple terms, Freud has said that there is a natural desire that already is present in the mind of a son to mate with his mother, but due to the fear of father, he is not able to do so, which leads to repression of this desire, and to make sure that does not manifest in its does not manifest actually, the taboo has been placed by the society. But many critics are there who argue that this statement is incorrect, because what happens after death of father? If we talk about if father dies, in that case there is no fear in the mind of son, but still we did not see the cases of incest. So that is why this is not a very, very valid theory. The second theory is something that is called as familiarity theory or childhood familiarity theory. So childhood familiarity theory, that was given by Westermark, again a well-known anthropologist. So Westermark basically said that if two individuals are being brought up together, are growing up together since childhood, it creates sexual disinterest among these two individuals, and that is why what happens, they cannot, basically they behave like brother and sister, and that is why there is a taboo that is called as incest taboo. But again, this does not explain the point that if this is something that is happening naturally, why there was need for society to put a taboo. So that also does not explain clearly. However, some experiments and case studies have been done where we have seen that in the case of kibbutzim system Israel, in case of Israel, there is a kibbutz system. Kibbutz system is where all members of society are living commonly. There is no private resources. So in kibbutz system, since all the members are living together, all the children are also being raised up together, and thus all children from very beginning are playing together and growing up together. So this study was conducted by Talman, and Talman has observed that this statement is incorrect, because the children are familiar from very beginning. They do not have very strong sexual interest with, among each other, and even when they marry, this marriage result in large number of divorces. And this point has also been established further by another anthropologist by the name of Arthur Wolf. And Arthur Wolf has said that in the Taiwanese society, in some Taiwanese society, there is a concept where the child marriage is done. That means the daughter-in-law is basically living together. For example, two friends are there. Both friends have decided that we will marry our children later on. So once these two friends have decided that that this person's daughter will marry the other person's son, now this daughter will not be raised by her father. This daughter will be raised by the father-in-law in his own house. That means both the husband and wife are being raised together in the same house from very early childhood. And in that case, he found out that whenever such marriages happen, more than 60% of those marriages have resulted in divorce. And one of the reasons Arthur will believe is something that can be traced back to the childhood familiarity theory, that again causes disruption in their family life. So that is the childhood familiarity theory. So Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory, Westermark's childhood familiarity theory. The third theory that has been given in this case is something that we can call as family disruption theory. So family disruption theory was given by Malinowski. And Malinowski explained the reason why incest has been considered or put as a taboo by society is because if incest becomes a normal part of society, it will lead to disruption of society. Why it will lead to disruption of society? Because we have discussed before, the smallest unit of society is what? It is the family. So because if incest is allowed, in that case the family members will have a lot of conflicts, role conflict. They will have a lot of jealousy among each other. There will be increased sexual competition among the family members. So due to such kind of incidences that we can see, if incest is not considered as taboo, that will lead to the breakdown of the family itself. And if the family itself breaks down, the entire social structure will break down. And to preserve the social structure, that is where the need of the, what we can say, incest taboo comes into picture. On the other hand, another is something that we can call as family cooperation theory. And this was given by Leslie White. And as per and E.B. Tyler, two anthropologists are basically associated with this theory that is called as family cooperation theory. We have Leslie White and we have E.B. Tyler. So what these people are saying? They are saying that incest taboo is necessary for ensuring that there is a cooperation that exists between different families of a society. That means basically incest taboo is to ensure that alliance system develops by building a relationship between two different kin groups. For example, if children are marrying within their own family, what will happen? They will not have any alliance with the other kin groups, and in that case what will happen? The cooperation will not exist, and if cooperation will not exist, society itself will cease to exist. So to make sure that alliances develop, there is a concept of practice of exogamy, and it is a practice of exogamy that can be associated with the development of incest taboo. But again, it does not explain that why we cannot have existence or coexistence of both. Some of the anthropologists have argued that if this is the real reason behind incest taboo, why some families, if suppose they have two daughters or two sons, why they cannot marry one daughter outside to make sure that they have certain alliances, and at the same time they can marry the one daughter within their own family group, so that they can keep the resources and the this daughter within our family group. So exogamy and endogamy within a family can coexist if we have to believe in the family cooperation theory. So that is a major criticism of the family cooperation theory. So family cooperation theory, family disruption theory, we have discussed before the Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory. We have discussed about the Westermarck's theory as well. One last theory is something that is called as inbreeding avoidance theory. Now, inbreeding avoidance theory states that incest taboo exists to overcome or to minimize the diseases that occurs due to inbreeding. Basically, if two close related family members are marrying each other, are mating with each other, in that case there will be increase in homologous chromosome, and this homologous chromosome can create genetic disorder, especially if they are recessive in nature. So there will be high chances of recessive genetic disorder, and thus it is argued by the inbreeding avoidance theorists that to make sure that the recessive genetic disorder does not accumulate, recessive genes do not accumulate within a society, incest has been considered or categorized as a taboo. But again, some of the critics argue that incest taboo is not something which is a modern day phenomenon. It is not something that has come into picture after we have understanding of the chromosomes and genes and all these things. It was from a very beginning when people do not have understanding about all these complex scientific understanding. So how come they could have argued and thought about having a inbreed this incest taboo? And in this case, Raymond Firth, again a very notable anthropologist, presents a counter argument. And what he says, he has actually studied a tribe that is called as Tikopia tribe in the Central Pacific. And as per Raymond Firth, Tikopias in Central Pacific, basically they have a concept which they use is something that they call as Mara. Now Mara is something that we can understand is similar to what they can call as vitality or life force of a particular person. And they have this understanding that if a children is born due to born when the parents are closely related to each other, or children are born out of the incest activities, in that case they have very weak Mara. That means they are more likely to suffer from diseases, they are more likely to die prematurely, and they are more likely to become weak even if they are able to grow up and survive. And thus they believe that incest leads to weak Mara. So Firth argues that the primitive society did not have to have this complex understanding of genes and chromosomes and all this basically inbreeding, but even if by understanding, by looking at the examples from generations to generations, they can develop this clear understanding that the children born out of incest are having weaker immune system, or they are more likely to die, and that might have caused the development of incest as a taboo. So these are the overall five major theories that has been argued that might have resulted into incest taboo. However, you also have in the older time examples of incest being sanctioned at the highest level. For example, if we talk about the pharaohs in Egypt, pharaohs were the ancient kings of Egypt. Or if we talk about the Inca Empire in Peru, in South America. So both the pharaohs of Egypt and the Inca Empire, in the Inca Empire of Peru, the royal family never married outside of their family. That means in both these kingdoms, brother-sister marriage was very common and acceptable socially. But reason here is very simple, because since these are the kings, there is nothing or no one in the society that can compare them in terms of status, and that time it is called as in terms of the purity of blood. So in those empire, the reason why people marry within the family, why pharaohs in the pharaohs of Egypt and Incas of Peru, brother sister marriage was common. Anthropologist argues it is because to maintain purity of blood, because no one is similar or even can come closer to the status of the kings of Incas and Egypt, and that is why we try to understand we have these kind of marriages that is common. So that is all about the three types of regulations as we have discussed. That is the preferential regulations, we have the prescriptive regulations, and we have last the prescriptive regulations. Then in prescriptive regulations, two other terms we can understand. One is hypergamy and other is hypogamy. So hypergamy and hypogamy. Now what is hypergamy? Hypergamy is something that is called as anuloma vivah as well. Anuloma vivah in Hindu society. And hypogamy is called as a pratiloma vivah. So as per the caste Hindu society, hypergamy, if we talk about a particular girl or female, we can say. So as per the regulations of marriage, the particular female or girl is not allowed to marry someone who is below her caste. A person or girl especially can marry, she only has two possibilities, either to marry someone of her own caste, same caste, or someone who is of higher caste. And the reason behind this is very simple. It is because if a girl is marrying someone who is below her caste, it is considered as similar to losing the caste status, and thus that is not permitted. So a girl has only two options: to marry someone of higher caste, and because of a girl is marrying higher caste, this kind of marriage is preferable, and that is why it is called as the hypergamy. That is anuloma vivah. One is raising the caste status of a female member. On the other hand, hypogamy is pratiloma vivah. So hypogamy again is marrying with someone who is below one's own caste. So this kind of marriage, as we have discussed, it is not allowed for the girls member. However, if we talk about the boy or the male member of society, the male member of society are permitted both. Male can member someone of own caste, a girl of his own caste, as well as he can marry someone of one who is below her caste. So when a male member is marrying someone below his caste, it is called as hypogamy or pratiloma vivah, which is allowed, and hypergamy is allowed with reference to the girl, but a girl or female is not allowed to involved in the hypogamy. So this is also another kind of marriage regulations that you see in the Indian social system. So overall, we have incest taboo, and then we have the restriction on the hypogamy for the female child. So that is all about we have discussed in this class. What is marriage as per different anthropologies, the main definition of marriage. Then we have discussed about what is marriage a universal institution. If yes, then why is it a universal institution? And then we have discussed about the marriage regulations. So that is all for this particular class. In next class, we will discuss about some other very important relevant topics about the marriage concept in anthropology. Thank you very much.